Good morning, everybody. A beautiful spring day here in New York. And I am so pleased that we have Rob Foxcroft with us this morning. And it just goes with the beautiful spring day. So, welcome, welcome.
Oh, so hello to everybody. It's very, very sweet of you to ask me to come and do something, and I'll do my best. So when I first learned focusing, it puzzled me that the model of necessary and sufficient conditions put forward by Carl Rogers was more or less all about the listener and the listener's attitudes, whilst the six-step focusing manual of Gene Gendlin was primarily about the focuser with the listening companion in a secondary role. And I always knew that I wanted a model which brought these two together. I wanted to have an integrated model of focusing in relationship. And as I said a few moments ago, I found more and more that the act of listening is as healing for the listener as for the focuser, at least for me. Listening is as life forward for the companion as the act of focusing itself is for the focuser. I've often found, as B.B. Simon did and regularly used to say to me, that to listen to somebody else does even more to carry my own life forward than my own focusing does at that time. B.B. very often said, "Oh, Rob, I couldn't do any focusing. I was too tired. But I can always listen to somebody. And that always brings something." And that's a place where I was very close to BB. That's how I had it too. I can't always do focusing, but I can pretty much always sit down and say, "Hey, how is it for you?" So with these things in mind, I made a very simple, primitive model of focusing in relationship. It has 4 steps, or if I may borrow Gene Gendlin's nice expression, it has 4 movements: feeling, saying, hearing, checking. So first, feeling. The feeling movement is when the focuser makes what Gene liked to call the inward turn. The focuser makes the inward turn to see what is stirring at a bodily level, in the realm of feeling, to see whether a felt sense will form of some area in her life, of something which is noticeably impinging at that bodily level where we feel things. The second movement is saying. In saying, the focuser says a few words about the situation, about what the feeling is like. There are always these 3 aspects. Firstly, the living feeling. Secondly, the living situation, or what the feeling is about. And thirdly, what I call the living word. A word, phrase, image, color, symbol, sound, or gesture. For simplicity's sake, the living word, which in some way captures the essence of the feeling, of the situation. So that's the focuser's side, and it flows into the listener's side. So the third movement is for the listener and is called hearing. The listener's main task is to understand what the focuser is feeling and saying, to get the feeling of the situation, in Carl Rogers' famous phrase, as if you were that person, but without ever losing the as if. You may remember that Carl had a client with whom he lost the as if. He got in some way so empathic that he lost himself and had a grave panic and rushed home and said to his wife, "I have to get out of here." And she said, "Give me 10 minutes and I'll pack the car." And he disappeared with his wife for I think it was 3 months, because he'd got so lost in the feeling of empathy that he no longer had himself. So when he says, "as if you were that person, but without ever losing the as if," he's somebody who's vulnerable to losing the as if and had to learn to keep his wholeness when he was listening. So there's the task of understanding, which is part of hearing. And the other part is to evoke a feeling of safety and acceptance. And I want to quote Brian Thorne here. Brian was very important for me. He said to me and a group of other people one Sunday morning, "The most important thing for a listener is self-acceptance. Because when you have self-acceptance, the acceptance which you offer to the other person will ring true." So I wrote a little poem in acknowledgement of the effect which Brian's acceptance had on me. It goes like this: tenderness. Dear Brian, with your twinkling, smiling face, infused with love, with tenderness and grace, here are my thanks for freeing me from shame, from acid words and evil thoughts of blame. You gave me hope. You brought me into life. You breathed that peace that puts an end to strife. And now, as shadows fall upon the sea, I think of you and still remain serene. So the third movement of meditative listening is the hearing, the taking in what the person is feeling and saying at the level of your own feeling as a listener. And the fourth step, I go with Carl Rogers here, the fourth movement of meditative listening, I've come to call just checking. Carl always said he was not trying to fix the other person, the client. He was just checking that what he took in was what the person meant. So in the fourth movement of meditative listening, after hearing and taking in what the focuser is feeling and saying, now the listener needs to say something in order to check that what she heard is what the listener intended and not somewhere off to the side of it in a world of fantasy. And that completes the circle because it brings us back to feeling again, brings us back to the first movement. When the focuser when the focuser hears the listener's words and feels, yes, you heard me, then an inward silence falls, as Jean Gendlin said to me, because the last thing has been heard and the next thing isn't here yet. There must be a silence because the next thing hasn't arrived, is what Jean wanted to say to me. And this is the thought which led to the little 4-line poem which I read to you once before. When you feel heard, a silence falls. In that silence, more may come. Often it is something deeper. You can feel it just now forming at the edge of being. So this is my model of meditative listening. It's very simple, nothing special, and yet I've sat with it already for many years. Even with my restless, very wriggly mind, I don't find any need to change it. It seems strong to me as a model. And I have it in mind whenever I listen to anybody. So that's really all I wanted to say. We could divide into focusing pairs if that would suit you. And maybe I should just say a quick 4-line version of the model again in case you want to stay as close to it as you can. The focuser is feeling for what is alive in the present moment and saying what the feeling is like, together with just a little perhaps of what the feeling is about. The listener is healing it. The listener is hearing the quality of the focuser's feeling as much in the music of the focuser's voice as in the words spoken, and is taking in that quality of feeling. And the listener is then finding a few fresh words as a way of checking that what she has heard is what the focuser intended. And then both together are looking out for that telling moment of silence which comes when a person really feels heard. So before we break, maybe Dorothy would you read the Vigilant Humanity poem?
A Vigilant Humanity. When people ask me, Rob, what do you do? I say, I simply try to hear what people say to me. Listening is a very simple practice, a pure practice, like running. Running is a pure practice. We can all run, for sure. So can we run like Carl Lewis, like the wind over the sea? One day, maybe, I shall run like Carl Lewis, like the wind over the sea. Like drawing. Drawing is a pure practice. We can all pick up a pencil. When will I draw like Raphael, as the grass grows? A line streams from his fingers, and a lovely woman is born. Listening is the sea that is stirred by the wind, the ground that is grown by the grass. Listening is a vast space, open and attentive, empty and full, waiting and receptive. Listening is empathy, clarification, and encouragement.